ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Monte Poker episode 44. This session is coming to you guys from Outlaws Card Room in Atascadero, as you may have seen in the intro. This is from last Thursday's session, 11/14. Our second cash game session back in the mix. Got plenty of hands to go over, but before we dive in, I just want to give everybody a quick reminder that we're going to be playing at Outlaws every single Thursday. So if you guys are trying to get some YouTube time and try to make the vlog, feel free to stop by. Last week's game was super fun with a ton of action, and if you don't believe me, check out this hand. All right, so we were in for $300, but we're not involved in this hand. Literally the very first hand of the night that gets dealt. We have an open from the Outlaws GM, Anthony. Joe was on the small blind, and he put in a raise. Anthony jammed, Joe re-jammed, player in the big blind folded, and the players agreed to run this board twice. Joe asks Anthony if he has a pair. Anthony says yes. Joe flips over pocket queens. Anthony just laughs, says he has pocket tens. Going to this first run out with 455 in the middle. Board comes out king, ace, 8, 7 on the turn, and another 7 on the river. Doesn't help pocket tens at all. Second board comes out 8, 9, 3 with 2 hearts. Turn is a 4 of spades, and the river is an 8 of hearts. Queens is good on both boards. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that was the first hand that was dealt tonight. The second hand of the night, we get dealt ace king offsuit. The action folds over to us. I decide to bet $15 here. The hijack calls, small blind calls, and the big blind puts in the call as well. So we're going to go 4 ways to this flop, $60 in the middle, and the board runs out king 9-4 with 2 clubs. We have top pair with the best kicker. Relatively safe board, but there is a flush draw down there. I decided to check, but I really don't like how I played this flop into 3 other players. The turn is a 4 of spades. Ain't too much for us here. When the big blind leads out for $30, I decide to min click it up to 60. The hijack puts in the call, but both the blinds get out of the way, which is really surprising considering the big blind already had half the money in. But I'm not complaining, he let his hand go. Threw in an extra $30, and we're going heads up to this river. 210 in the middle, and the final card is the 3 of hearts. Given how the hand played, I think it's far more likely that the hijack has a flush draw as opposed to some sort of pair. I announce a bet of $60. He says nice hand, he missed, returns his cards to the dealer, and we get to scoop ourselves a nice little pot. Some time goes by and we look down at the pocket jiggities. We had actually gotten this hand a few minutes ago, but had to fold on an ace high board. But this time there's a $15 button straddle, so I'm gonna get a little sneaky and just put in a call. I know Joe's a capable player, and if he wakes up with a decent hand, he's going to squeeze a lot lighter if everybody limps in here. And just like we planned, the action gets back to Joe. He puts in a raise to $65. Small blind folds, big blind folds, middle position player folds, and now there's only one player in the middle, but with a hand as good as Jack's, I think we should definitely raise here. So I main click it to 130. We lose Mike, but Joe decides to come along for the ride. 305 in the middle, and the board runs out ace queen 9 with 2 diamonds. I snap jam here because we have less than a pot size bet left behind. Praying our opponent does not have an ace, which does not seem to be the case when he returns his cards to the dealer. We end up scooping another good sized pot here. As I'm sure many of you know, here at Outlaws, the 1-3 game is a match to stack. Most of the players on the table have matched the biggest stack. I'm not trying to get pushed around, so we're gonna go ahead and add on for another $200 here and see if we can make anything happen. This next hand we look down at king queen offsuit on the button. There's a $6 straddle by yours truly. Small and big blind put in the call, and the action gets back over to me. I decide to throw 20 more on top. $81 in the middle, and we go to a board run out that comes out queen 4-8 with 2 hearts. The action checks over to me, and with top pair, we're definitely going to continue here, but I want to keep it small enough to keep our opponents interested. I decide to bet $25 here. It's about a third of the pot, more or less. Small blind puts in the call, and the big blind puts in the call, and we go off to the turn, which is a phenomenal king of diamonds. Small blind checks, big blind checks. We now got upgraded to top 2 pair. Definitely going to put in a bet here, but I'm debating how much. Not sure if I should go for 2 streets or 3 streets of value here, but it's very possible that one of our opponents hit this king. So I decide to continue for $70, a little bit closer to half pot here. Small blind gets out of the way. the big blind, one of the outlaw goats, Mr. Shelby, puts in the call. Go off to this river with 296 in the middle, and the 2 of diamonds peels off. Shelby takes some time to think it over and checks it over to me when the action gets over to me. And now I'm debating what sizing to use on this river card here. I think since we kept the flop and turn pretty conservative, it makes sense to go big on this river here with the hand as strong as ours. The only thing we're losing to is a set. So I decided to go for 200, which is about 2/3 of the pot. If Shelby has a king with a pretty good kicker, I think he's going to call this bet at least half the time. I honestly think I could have gone for a full pot size bet of around 300 and it wouldn't have really changed much, but my man goes deep into the tank here, goes back and forth for a while. Seems like he's in a really tough spot, so I'm assuming he has a pretty good hand and hoping that he pays us off here. Eventually he does flick in the call. We show our 2 pair. Shelby says nice hand and returns his cards face down towards the dealer, and we scoop the $700 pot. Some time goes by and we look down at 7-4 suited. Yes, you guys heard that right, 7-4 suited. We're on the button with $6 already in there. Anthony raised to $30. I went ahead and put in the call. Not sure why. I think just because we were suited and on the button, I decided to try and see a flop with this hand. We get one more caller, so there's $94 in the middle, and we go to this board run out that comes 10 deuce 7 with 2 clubs. All we have is middle pair here, but with Anthony bets $50, I am a non-believer, so I very quickly put in the call. We lose 1 player and go to this turn, which now comes the Jack of Hearts. The action is back on my boy Anthony, and he decides to bet $125. To be 100% honest, I think he's absolutely full of it. I really think that our pair is good in this spot, but the thing that I'm having trouble with is there are 2 cards that are above our 7, and if he's willing to bet 125 on this turn here, he's going to absolutely blast off for what I'm assuming will be about a pot size bet, which would be closer to $300 or $400. I was really hoping not to see paint on the turn, and for my newer players, paint just means any face card. So jack, queen, king, or ace. If this turn hadn't been a jack, I probably would have put in a beefy check raise. I'm assuming he had 2 Broadway cards, anything between ace jack to ace king. I guess it's also possible he has ace 5 suited. Ultimately, I do decide to fold here. I just decide that I'm going to wait and try to find a better spot tonight. I don't want to just do it with 3rd pair, no redraw. Anthony mucked his cards face down at the time, but he was kind enough to tell us the following morning they had ace queen in this spot. Not sure what the suits were, but they weren't relevant to the flush draw. Not sure if we would have been able to hold on to a massive bet on the river with just a pair of 7s. Well played, my friend. For this next hand, the $7 straddle is on. The action folds around to the blinds. They put in the call. Big blind decides to actually fold his option. Only the small blind called. Gets back over to me, and there's not enough money in the middle. So even though our hand is not great, I decide to raise it to $18. It'd be very okay if the small blind just folded here and we took a couple dollars with this terrible hand and didn't lose anything to the drop, but small blind does come along for the ride. So we're going heads up to this board with $39 in the middle, and the board comes out 6-4-10 with 2 clubs. Small blind leads out for $25 here, and I very quickly put in the call. 89 now in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes a queen of hearts. I thought our opponent was just betting the flush draw on the flop because I didn't expect him to have a 6 or a 4. Guess it's possible he may have had a 10, but I'm not sure if he would have used that sizing with top pair. He checks it to me on this queen. I decide to bet $65 here. He very quickly puts in the call, kind of falling in line with the fact that I think he's on the flush draw. 209 in the middle, and we go to this river, which comes a 5 of clubs. Not the card we wanted to see. And to make things, I guess, a little bit easier for us, our opponent leads out here for $100. I told myself I was going to fold on any club, and now I'm mulling it over and want to make a hero call, but I've burned myself enough times making these hero calls, and I have to verbally tell the table what my plan was to do and convince myself that I need to make the disciplined fold here.
Told myself I'd fold if the club hit.
I always lied to
So I'm gonna.
myself. I wasn't gonna eat that candy bar, and then I still eat it. Straight flush.
Wow, nice hand.
So not really a crazy laydown for us. It was pretty easy to throw that away. I just didn't want to. But Mike hit a straight flush in that hand, which you don't see very often, so had to throw that in there for my man. Nice hand, sir. Sorry I didn't have anything better to pay you off. This next hand, We look down at Queen 10 offsuit on the small blind, but there's only 2 other players involved, so I decided to raise it up to $20. It's a bit wide for me to be doing from this position, but you know, we haven't played a hand in like 5 minutes, so why not? Let's get in there. 3 of us go into the flop, $63 in the middle. Board comes out ace 10 5 with 2 clubs. Action checks through on the flop when the 5 of hearts peels off on the turn. I think our 10 might be good, so I throw $20 in the middle here. Shelby and Anthony very quickly put in the call. We go off to this river, which comes in 8 of spades. I grab an additional $60, slide it into the middle, into the pot of 123. And when the action gets back over to Shelby, he doesn't put in the call. He puts in a very beefy raise to 150, going a little bit over pot. Thing with this bet sizing is I already have $60 in there, so it's actually only $90 more for me to make this call. So with that in mind, I feel like this jerk off is just going for value here. He could be bluffing my socks off, but who knows? He's definitely capable of it. But I feel like Shelby's bluffs are typically a little bit bigger. Either way, I didn't want to find out this time. I let my hand go and then make the following comment.
I have this thing with Shelby where when he's bluffing, I always fold, and when he has it, I call.
Perfect timing.
And I stand by that statement. Moving on to the next one. But before we move on to the next one, forgot to mention that we added on for another $500. We're about even with our original $500 starting stack after losing a couple hands, but there's a lot of money on the table, so we don't want to miss any opportunities to get it all in with the nuts or something close to. All right, now we'll jump to the next hand. For this next one, we're gonna get out of line once more, calling a little too wide on the small blind with King 10 offsuit when under the gun raises to 20 pre-flop, $68 in the middle, and we go to this run out that comes out 3-3 queen with 2 clubs. We have a backdoor flush draw, but nothing besides that. When Shelby decides to bet $30 here, I do not believe for a second that he has this queen, so we very quickly put in the call. 128 in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes a 3 of diamonds. I check this, and then Shelby doesn't take too long before checking this back. When he checks this back, I'm putting him on an ace high hand, something maybe like ace king, ace jack, ace 10. So my plan was to bet on the river, but then when the ace of hearts peels off, I no longer really have that option because I now think he might actually have a pair, which is going to be really hard to get him off of. And then my boy decides to fire for 120, which I absolutely cannot stand. This is exactly what he would do if he was full of it, go for a full pot size bet. So if he hit this ace on the river, this bet is super polarizing, and I'm going back and forth in my mind thinking this is a straight 50-50 and trying to decide whether or not I want to call here. I basically have the nut no pair here. That would actually be king jack, but we're so freaking close to it. But ultimately we decide to not be heroes yet again.
Really?
I don't even know why I'm taking. I'm tanking with king high. I really don't believe you.
40 million, I don't know. You can look, nobody else. They're estimating what the gate is. Did you have me?
No.
You saw his cards.
Obviously we were no good, and we were right that Shelby did have an ace, but to my surprise he had 2 aces and we saved some money on this river. You know what this vlog is really lacking, guys? More hands versus Shelby. So of course we're gonna get into it once more. There's a $7 button straddle. Shelby opened at $30 under the gun. We're looking down at 9-10 suited. On the small blind, I decide to put in the call. Big blind puts in the call, and we go 3 ways to this flop. $97 in the middle, and the flop comes 3-8-5 with 1 spade. We have a backdoor flush and a backdoor straight draw. Check over to Shelby, and he decides to continue here with another $30 bet. I decide to keep him honest here and put in the call 1 time, hoping to improve on the turn. The big blind also puts in the call, so we're gonna go 3 ways to this turn. 187 in the middle. The 4 of spades does give us a good card to continue with. I check it over to the big, who checks it back over to Shelby. He takes a little bit more time with his decision this time, but he does decide to continue for $125. And I think at this point in the hand, this is where I make a mistake. Looking back on it, I think this would have been a very good spot to check raise. Could have made it around 250, which obviously would have been called, but it would have set up a very nice all-in for us on the river, trying to represent a big hand like maybe a set or a straight. But ultimately that is not what we did. I ended up just putting in a call here. We then lost the big blind, so we're just going heads up to this river, which comes a 10 of diamonds. And this is where I make the biggest mistake that I think I made in the entire hand. I wanted to take a stab at this. At this point, I'm pretty certain that Shelby has a big pair, given how he played the last two streets and pre-flop. I want to bluff at this hand now. We do have top pair, but I don't think it's good. So I fire out a bet of 250, which I think is just way too small. Shelby puts in the call very quickly. I tell him I just have a 10. He flips over kings, which is pretty much what I thought he had. If I wanted to bluff at this, I should have either jammed or just made a pot size bet of around 400. If we would have min clicked the turn, like I mentioned earlier, the jam on the river would have looked super nutted. But unfortunately, for some reason, that wasn't what we were thinking at the time. I think I would have liked it a lot more if I would have just checked and gave up on this river, or if I had actually fired a sizing that was not just going to get snapped off by an overpair, which is what I thought Shelby was on. Oh well, you live and you learn. Moving on to the next one. So after punting in that last hand, we added on for another $400. So we still have a little bit of firing power, but I definitely want to slow down because we are bleeding money like crazy. But then we proceed to lose another $100 or so. But that's quite all right, because then we look down at this absolute monster in the cutoff, Jack 5 suited. Totally kidding for the newer players. This is not that great of a hand, but we already put some money in for the straddle. So when it got raised an additional $20, there was a caller in between. I decided, what the heck, let's see a flop. What's the worst that could happen? $93 in the middle, and the board runs out 7 ace queen with 2 clubs. We flop ourselves a flush draw. The button bets 25 here. Player in the middle puts in the call. We're obviously going nowhere with our jack high flush draw. We immediately bink the flush on the turn when the 8 of clubs peels off. The action checks over to me. I decide to fire for $100 here. The button very quickly puts in the call. 10 of spades doesn't change too much on this river, except now that there's a potential straight out there. Don't want to go too big here and scare off the button. I go 175. He very quickly puts in the call, and our flush is in fact good. We start to see some money flowing in the right direction when we look down at pocket fours in the small blind. There is an open at $20, so we very quickly put in the call, just planning to set mine here a majority of the time. 4 total callers, $100 in the middle, and this board comes out jack deuce deuce with 2 spades. And I don't know what came over me, but when I saw this paired board, I was inclined to bet at it and try to steal this pot here. I decided to fire $30 into 100. Now looking at it, pretty stupid to bet into 4 other opponents here on a jack high board. At the time I was thinking, well, the only thing we're really worried about is the jack, otherwise our pair should be good. So after the cutoff, who was the original pre-flop aggressor, puts in the call here, I'm a little bit concerned, but it's also very possible that he just has the spade draw. So when this queen of clubs peels off on the turn, I decide to continue the story that we have a good hand and we like this board. I decide to bet $75, just a little bit under half pot here. Puts the call relatively quickly. 310 in the middle, and we go to this river heads up. The 3 of clubs peels off, which doesn't really change anything on this board. At this point, I'm ready to wave the white flag. I don't think I can get our opponent off of a jack. Definitely not getting him off of a queen. If he just has the flush draw and we bet, there's no way that he's going to call. So I think we can just take our pocket fours to showdown because we have some decent showdown value. Our opponent checks it back and shows ace jack of diamonds. I think if he had a worse kicker, we may have been able to get him off of this hand, but as played, it didn't feel like I was going to, so I didn't bother bluffing the river. All right, no more bluffing tonight. Time to actually hit a hand and get some chips moving in the right direction. Look down at 7-5 suited. We are on the button. There's an open to $26. We go ahead and put in the call and go to this run out 3 ways. $82 in the middle. Board comes out 9, 9, 10 with 2 spades. The action checks over to me and I decide to bet here for $40. My buddy Jordy folds, and when the action gets back to the cutoff, he raises to $80. I am going absolutely nowhere with my flush draw, so I very quickly put in the call, bink the 2 of spades on the turn and get our flush. I look at what he has left. Don't quite know if he'll call an all in because he has a little over 300, so I bet 150 here on this turn. That way he can't fold on the river for another 170 more. He very quickly puts in the call, 542 in the middle, and we go to the jack of diamonds on the river. Our opponent goes all in here. We snap him off, obviously, and our opponent shows Jack 9. Yikes. I did not put him on a flopped full house, but I definitely thought he had a 9 after he check raised us on the flop. I knew we were behind at that point, but then we turned our flush and I swear we were good, which we absolutely were. But then the luck box hit the river, boated on us. Rather unfortunate. And with that left our stack a little bit crippled. So what do? Add on for 500 more. How much are we in on the night? Somewhere in the ballpark of 1900, but we won't worry about that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a couple more hands to get through before we cut you loose. For this next one, we missed the peel back, but we have ace king offsuit. Hoping these suits are correct, but they aren't really going to be relevant to the hand. I'm in the small blind and shall be open to 15 bucks. One player called after him under the gun +1. Jordy decided to raise it to about $30. The action gets over to me and I decided to bump it up to 75, hoping to thin out the field a little bit and hopefully just get one caller. Big blind gets out of the way, Shelby gets out of the way, middle position player gets out of the way, and when it gets back to Jordy, he puts in the call. Going heads up with my buddy to this board, 183 in the middle, and the run out is 949 with 2 hearts. If I had jacks or better, I would continue on this flop. So on this 9 high board, I very quickly put in a continuation bet of $100. Jordy snaps us off. 383 in the middle. We go to this turn, which comes an ace of diamonds. We now have top pair with a good kicker, but I don't want to scare Jordy off, so I put in another $100 bet. Very quickly puts in the call. 583 going to this river, and the jack of clubs peels off. I announce a $200 bet, just still very conservative given the pot size. It's less than half pot on this river. Nothing really got there and the dynamic of the board did not change. I'm really hoping Jordy just has a weaker ace here and is going to pay us off. If he had a 9 or ace jack, he would have paid us off already. But after thinking it over for a little bit, he does decide to make a disciplined fold here and let go of his pocket 10s. I know this might not seem like a big fold for some of the viewers, but Jordy really likes to fight for every pot, so for him, it definitely is. Thought we were done punting for the night, but apparently not. Looked down an ace 9 offsuit on the button. We straddled for 10 bucks and nobody put in a raise. So we're going to go to this flop multi-way here, $41 in the middle. Board comes out ace king 3 rainbow. The action checks around over to me. Since we have top pair here, I think a small bet is in order, so I bet $15. Small blind gets out of the way, but under the gun puts in the call. Cutoff lets his hand go. We go heads up to this turn, which comes an 8 of diamonds. The action checks over to me again, and I decide to continue here for a bit of a bigger size, $45 into 71. The under the gun player tanks for quite a while before eventually putting in a very chunky check raise to $125. This is a very strong line, but I've seen him get to showdown with a couple of whiffed flush draws that he played very aggressively. So I'm thinking he is pretty capable of doing this with just a flush draw. The river brings a 7 of spades, and the under the gun player continues his story that he has a strong hand and decides to bet $300 here into 325, which I think is just too big. I really should have folded this once we got check raised on the turn if I wasn't planning on calling the river with top pair. What was the point of calling the turn with top pair? But I was trying to just keep our boy honest and see if he was going to slow down on the river. He in fact did not. Even if he did have just a flush draw on the turn that he was betting aggressively, he was obviously going to fire big for another street. So I really should have either folded the turn or called both the turn and the river in this spot. Let me know what you guys think below. It's been a few hours since we looked down at the jiggities, but we picked them up once again tonight. This time we are on the small blind. There's a $10 straddle with a couple of limpers. So when the action gets back over to me, I decide to bump it up to $45. Our Huckleberry Jordy is never short of a call, but everybody else does decide to get out of the way. Just me and my boy tangling once again on the felt, 120 in the middle, and we go to this run out that comes out 659 rainbow. I'm first to act here, but I don't want to scare Jordy off, so I'm definitely going to put in a conservative bet here. I decide that $50 is a pretty good amount. I want to keep a lot of his ace high ends and any other pocket pairs that he might have, like 3s, 4s, 7s, or 8s. Jordy pretty quickly puts in the call, 220 in the middle, and we go to the turn, which comes an ace of spade, which is not a card that I wanted to see. I was putting Jordy on either a made hand or a big ace, so I'm going to just go ahead and continue here for an additional $50, hoping that Jordy's going to raise us if he does in fact have this ace. Quickly puts in the call, 320 in the middle. We go to the river, which now comes a jack of hearts. Any qualms I previously had have now been settled, and now I am praying that Jordy has the ace. As I mentioned, I kept our bet on the turn really small, and if he did have the ace, I really would have expected him to raise in that spot. Just flatting there makes no sense. So at this point, I think the only thing that I can really do is go for a pretty chunky bet here. I wanted to make a pot-sized bet, but I miscalculated by a little bit. Ended up betting 250 instead of 300, but that's still a big enough bet to hopefully get the job done. I had verbally announced my bet along with putting the chips out. Jordy grabs a stack of chips and slides them into the middle, which I originally thought was a raise, but there was a bit of confusion here, but I immediately tried to go all in.
Swing like
That's 350. I just called.
Oh, it was 250.
That's 350. You said 250 or 350?
250.
Oh, 250. This would be a 350. Okay, I thought he said 350. So what's the range?
That's fine. It's a call. That's fine. Yeah, it's not enough for a raise anyway. It's fine. I thought you.
Set.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Jordy.
You got me? Oh my god. That's pretty fair.
Yeah.
I don't even feel bad.
What an absolute cooler. I was not expecting Jordy to have a set there. I'm honestly shocked that he didn't re-raise it, but he's been sucking out on people left and right on the river all night. So unfortunately, my boy was due for that variance. After that last hand, we had a pretty decent stack. Unfortunately, we weren't able to run it up much more than that. We lost probably around $200 to $300 before the end of the night. At that point, it was time for us to rack up and cash out because we got work in the morning. Going over these session stats, we were in for 1950, out for 1170, giving us a total loss of $780 over this 7-hour and 14-minute session. Not our best work, but you know, we still got something back and have enough to come back and play next week. Go like and comment.